And with the wave of her wand, she created the heavens and the earth, and thus declared that in the beginning,
in the beginning, in the beginning,
no, in the beginning,
yeah, in the
beginning,
in the
Listen properly.
beginning,
in the beginning,
beginning, beginning, beginning, beginning, beginning, beginning.
in the beginning.
In the beginning, mother. Wagwan, good morning, good evening, and good night. Welcome to episode 4 of... Dude, it's not that hard. The show where we take the complicated and make it not that complicated. In the previous episodes, we spoke about how to construct and write a story, how to have a beginning, middle, and end. Next, we spoke about creating a protagonist. What are the things that make a good protagonist? Next, we talked about our antagonist. What makes a good antagonist? What makes a good villain? With all of that, however, you want to make sure that you have a world to put them in. They can't exist on a blank white screen, right? That would be weird. Building worlds can be some of the most fun process of writing, which is why most writers kind of gets hung up on the world building process. Many writers can get so involved in their world building that that's kind of all they create. So we're here to simplify the process and at the same time become gods creating universes and galaxies. Okay, but let's slow down and rewind a little bit. Consider from the beginning the type of story that you want to make. If it's a happy story, then you may want to create a utopia. If it's a dark and brooding story, then you may want to consider things like a dystopia. Create a profile for your world in the same way that you would do a protagonist and an antagonist. When making a profile for your world, you want to know what is the genre of the story that you're trying to tell. If, for example, your story takes place in a fantasy epic, then you may want to consider it setting it in a fantasy land. If the story takes place in the future, then you may want to consider the world to be a super sci-fi based world. While the worlds aren't limited to the genre that you're writing, a genre can help you shape the type of worlds that you want to create. After all, you can have many different genres in different worlds and different world settings. For example, such as the Stepford Wives, where you have this horror genre in a sort of utopian society that looks really wonderful on the outside. You can have a romance story such as Dear John, which partially takes place in a war era. You can write a fantasy but take place in a modern urban setting, such as in the movie Looper or I Am Number 4. When creating these societies, you want to consider the rules of the society, the rules of the world. If your world has magic, is it hard magic, like in The Legend of Korra, where you have earthbenders and firebenders and waterbenders and airbenders, but they can't necessarily do each other's airbending unless, of course, you're the Avatar? Or is it closer to soft bending, like in Lord of the Rings or in Star Wars, where you have electric powers, but they aren't quite defined of what is the Force.
That's not how the Force works.
If your story is science fiction, what type of science is it? Are there such thing as robots? Are the types of robots super futuristic cyborg type of robots? Or are there more the mechanical, down-to-earth realism, like in The Expanse, for example? Are your robots evil, like in The Terminator? Get to the chopper. Or are they softer and sweet, like in the movie Artificial Intelligence? I say dead robots. When it comes to rules in your world, the more important thing is to be consistent. Establish your rules and then commit to that throughout the story. You only want to break rules usually at the end of the story, after you've established the groundwork of building up your story and making your readers comfortable with the world that you place them in. The reason that you may want to break the rule that you've established is to offer a twist ending that your reader may not have seen before. In one of my favorite stories, Knives Out, the author doesn't choose to go into great detail about the world that exists in this murder mystery, because he instead chooses to focus on the zaniness of that family. However, he does establish one rule that he sticks throughout the entire story, and that is the maiden, Marta, cannot tell a lie. And if she does, she throws up. In a world where you suspect that everyone is a liar, having one character that you know cannot tell a lie makes for some interesting interaction. And then, spoiler, at the end, when he reveals the big twist and decides to break his one rule, it becomes a huge entertainment for the audience because they didn't see it coming. Hey, Marta, our show is the best show in Austin, right?
Yes.
When building your world, you want to consider if you're doing hard world building or soft world building. Now, the difference between hard world building and soft world building is how much detail you choose to describe the world that you live in versus the characters that you choose to focus on. For example, in The Lord of the Rings, there are entire Elvish languages that are created. There are entire cities that are described. In The Expanse, the laws of the physics are explicitly described, down to how the thrusters of each ship is created. Those levels of detail help put in the reader's mind a lush sense of the world that they are choosing to participate in. However, when you have soft world building, you tend to choose to focus more on the characters and play a bit loose and fast with the laws of the world around you, because that's not necessarily the central focus of what you're trying to convey to the reader. In the movie Frozen, Elsa is a girl who has all these magic ice powers. However, it's not described in the world that she lives in how that magic necessarily gets there. Of course, some explanation is given in the sequel. However, in the first movie, you're not really told much about the world that Elsa lives in. We know that she is the princess of her village or the princess of her city. However, no one else has these magical powers. No one else is able to create life in a snowman. and it's not really given much attention to outside of, well, she just has those abilities. The reason why we as the audience don't really need to know the intricate details of the magic that exists in that world is because the story itself is about a girl who is secluded in her room and she fears exploring the outside world because she's afraid of the world around her. And it takes her sister Anna to break through to her and to make her feel accepted and loved in her community. While the magic exists, it's not a central focus of how the world works. We as the audience don't really care that much about that level of detail in this story. Now, the next thing that you'll want to consider is the setting of the country that your story takes place in. When picking a country, you want to make sure that you do your research and consider the cultural impact that that country may have on your story. Now, I love superheroes, and so I've been writing a story about superheroes that exist in my home country of Jamaica called Children of the Comet. Children of the Comet. Children of the Comet. The story is that a comet flies over the Caribbean and lands on the Gulf Coast of Florida, and the radiation from that comet gives teenagers and children special abilities. Now, in the future, they become superheroes and fight supervillains, your typical superhero stuff. However, me personally, because the story takes place in Jamaica, one of the things that I considered when writing my story was that Jamaicans don't really wear masks and would need a superhero mask. Now, why wouldn't they need superhero masks? Well, Jamaica is a very small country and everyone tends to know everyone. They would see a superhero flying over the sky, and even if they were fighting crime wearing their masks, they'd be like, wait, Anna Johnny that. I just saw him yesterday, That Captain Jamaica owes me $10, You see, the next time I see him, he better watch out. Our communities tend to be very small, so everyone pretty much knows everyone. So, in my story, no one wears masks. And for the most part, they usually keep their own names and don't necessarily go to an alias because they really don't need to. Now, when considering your country as well, it is very, very important that you consider stereotypes. You don't want to write a story set in a country without doing your research and end up offending a lot of people because you decided to lean on stereotypes. You don't want to write a story set in France where all the French people are jerks. Oui, 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 sacre bleu, baguette, I would like a fondue. You don't want your setting in Russia where all of them are alcoholics. In Soviet Russia, alcohol drinks you. And of course, in my home country, Jamaica, you don't want to write a story where everyone smokes weed. Hey man, you want some of this ganja, man? No, sorry, I don't actually smoke weed. Oh, whatever. Take the time to delve deep into what makes a culture interesting. You never know what you may find. Don't do your readers an injustice by succumbing to the bare minimum. And like every aspect of writing, you do have the freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do. But with these tools, it can become much easier for you to express yourself in the way that you want to and with the best of your abilities. Don't Don't do your readers an injustice by succumbing to the bare minimum. And like every aspect of writing, you do have the freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do. But with these tools, it can become much easier for you to express yourself in the way that you want to and with the best of your abilities. Remember, you don't have to take my word for it. There's so many books and resources out there that can teach you how to do your own world building. There's 185 Tips on World Building by Randy Ellefson. There's 30 Days of World Building by A. Trevina. There's Collaborative World Building for Writers and Gamers by Trent Hergenrader. And of course, they're my two favorite YouTubers, Jenna Moresi and Hello Future Me. Hello Future Me actually has his own book as well, called On Writing and World Building Volume 1. You can look up his name. It's Timothy Hickson. Alright, so it's been a month since we've started writing this book. We've learned how to structure our stories, we've learned how to write protagonists and antagonists, and we've now learned how to give them a world that they can thrive in. With all that being said, the final step is to put it all together, create yourself a book, and publish it. That's exactly what we're gonna do next week. So I hope to see you there. Sometimes the world can feel vast and sprawling, and we may ask ourselves, well, what's our purpose in it? You may feel like you're small and insignificant and may not have a role to play in this world around us. But the thing is, I believe there is no great plan per se, but that doesn't mean that your life doesn't have significance. Think of it this way. The vast universe exists with trillions upon trillions of atoms throughout time immemorial, and yet we are able to live through it and observe it. The universe is made up of the same atoms that we're made of, and so therefore the universe is within us and we are the universe in itself. And so the day-to-day may feel mundane sometimes, but your role in it isn't mundane. And so the important thing is to get up, brush yourself off if you're feeling down, take care of yourself. If you're feeling depressed, go to a therapist. Remember you have friends around who care about you. And you're not as insignificant as you think, because the universe is in us and we are the universe. And so I hope you take the time to make someone else's life a little bit better and a little bit easier. Because remember, I believe in you, and I'll see you in the next episode.